Let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really raw, deeply honest piece of writing from Bryn Berger that was originally published in Attitude magazine. It's called 10 Things People Say to You When You're Raising an Extreme Child. Look, whether you've ever secretly judged a parent for a screaming kid in the grocery store, or maybe you literally are that parent just desperately trying to hold it together, this is absolutely going to change your perspective. We're going to explore the utterly exhausting everyday reality of raising an extreme child and how these parents navigate the constant barrage of unsolicited advice they face.
And we're starting with a confession directly from the author herself. Before her own son's extreme behavioral challenges began at 18 months old, she admits that she actually used to be the one judging struggling parents. She would silently criticize the family with the screaming kids who pulled up in a van full of crusty goldfish crackers. It's such a powerful starting point because it just acknowledges human nature, right? We see a massive meltdown and we instantly assume poor parenting. But as she learned the hard way, when invisible disabilities are in the mix, that assumption is just dead wrong.
Because the difference between raising a typical child and an extreme one is honestly staggering. A normal parenting challenge might be a standard toddler tantrum because they can't have a specific toy. Extreme parenting, on the other hand, involves what she calls threat-level midnight behavior over completely insignificant things. It creates a reality where 90% of the day is an absolute battle. It's a brutal learning curve, and it really validates that while outsiders offering advice usually mean well, they literally have no idea what the daily lived reality is for these families.
So, how do you handle the discipline critics? Let's move into our first major theme and look at those well-intentioned friends and family members. You absolutely know the ones. The people who insist that stricter discipline is just this magical cure for everything. How on earth do parents of extreme children handle them without completely losing their minds?
Well, traditional punishments are often totally useless here. We've all heard the advice, right? Just take away all of his stuff. But the author shares this brilliant, kind of hilarious anecdote. When they threatened to box up all of her son's toys and give them away, her extreme child literally just calmly replied, "That's a great idea. I never really liked any of those toys anyway." Traditional leverage just does not work on a kid whose brain is wired differently. It's like bringing a standard hammer to disarm a highly complex ticking device.
So while your entire body might be urging you to scream in frustration at this terrible advice, the recommended response is so much calmer. You just smile and say, we haven't tried taking away his favorite toy. Maybe you can do that the next time you're with him. It's absolutely perfect. You use this wry, deflecting script to protect your own sanity, all while letting the advice giver slowly figure out the massive flaw in their logic if they ever actually had to try it.
Which brings up the exhausting daily battle for control. Critics love throwing out, "You're the boss, don't give in." But when you're raising an extreme child, drawing a hard line on every little thing is a guaranteed recipe for an all-day meltdown. The author gives a fantastic example. Her son wanted to wear 3 completely mismatched shades of camouflage clothing to school. She could either fight him for an hour over matching clothes or praise him for dressing himself and just let him leave the house looking like a spray-painted pickup truck. Obviously, she chooses peace.
And here is exactly how you explain that survival tactic to an outsider. Your inner thought is probably screaming, but the actual response you use is super calm. Some kids can handle being given direct orders. We have to choose our battles. It just gently educates the onlooker. It lets them know that survival in these homes means letting go of the minor, insignificant fights, like clothes or snacks, so you can save your energy for the battles that actually keep the child safe.
Part 1. Denial and the Phase.
When people casually brush off invisible disabilities like ADHD, autism, or ODD as just a passing phase or a boy being a boy, it is deeply frustrating. "It's just a phase" sounds so comforting on the surface, doesn't it? But for the parent, it actually triggers massive hidden anxiety. The author talks about how terrified she is that this isn't a phase. What if he doesn't grow out of it by high school? What if this lasts into adulthood? How is this going to affect his ability to hold down a job or be a loving partner? That dismissive comment totally ignores the very real, terrifying long-term fears keeping these parents awake at night. So how do you handle it without just bursting into tears or a fit of rage? You look right at the person and you simply say, "I hope you're right." It's the absolute perfect, pacifying response. It honestly just ends the conversation quickly, but it doesn't invalidate your own deep underlying fears. You acknowledge they meant well, and you mentally move on.
And then, of course, there's the absolute baffling nature of gender justification. Oh, he's just a boy. Yes, boys can be rambunctious. But as the author rightly points out,
No child, boy or girl, should have explosive, dangerous, threat-level midnight reactions over tiny inconveniences simply because they're male. Biology absolutely does not excuse extreme, uncontrollable behavior.
And that brings us to the ultimate mic drop response to stop the whole boys will be boys argument dead in its tracks. Instead of giving in to the urge to just scream, you say, "That is true. However, I am raising someone's husband and father, and I will teach him to respect authority." Boom. It leaves the advice giver completely speechless while affirming your total commitment to your kid's long-term character.
We also have to touch on pretty much the most offensive comment of all, the outright denial of invisible disabilities. The claim that ADHD or ODD isn't real, and it's just the result of poor parenting. This is the comment that understandably makes parents see red. Invisible disabilities don't come with a physical marker you can just point to, which makes it far too easy for ignorant onlookers to blame the parents. Honestly, it requires immense restraint from the parent to just take a deep breath, smile, and walk away before they literally get arrested for their reaction.
Let's transition into our final theme. What do you do when onlookers aren't just critiquing your discipline, but they are absolutely certain they possess the magical, simple cure for your child's highly complex neurological condition?
Yes, the reward chart. Just use stickers. The author shares a darkly funny reality about this kind of advice. She notes that extreme children might respond a bit better to praise, but they are just as likely to melt down anyway. She jokes that she could fill her son's entire room with Ninja Turtle stickers, and during a level 5 meltdown, he would literally just find a way to use those stickers in an assault attempt against her. Simple fixes do not work on complex neurology.
When people casually suggest simple fixes, they have zero idea of the sheer volume of interventions these parents have already tried. I'm going to run through this fast just to give you a sense of it. Calming strategies, behavioral therapy, occupational therapy, talk therapy, play therapy, reward charts, time-ins, time-outs, spanking, yelling, room isolation, taking toys away, 60-day food elimination diets, chiropractic care, essential oils, organic melatonin, multiple pediatricians, and full pediatric hospital evaluations. The absolute exhaustion of endless interventions is staggering.
Which leads right into the incredibly heavy judgment surrounding medical choices. You hear, he doesn't need medication, just give him essential oils. But the author emphasizes that turning to medication was their 6th major attempt, and they only went there after exhausting every single natural, holistic, and behavioral option on that massive list we just ran through. Parents do not medicate their children lightly for sure.
When you're faced with this kind of crunchy granola advice, here's the empowering script to shut it right down. You suppress the scream, and you say, "It is a process. No parent wants to medicate their child, but every good parent is willing to do whatever it takes to get her child's needs met. It is a fierce, absolutely unarguable defense of the incredibly difficult medical choices these parents are forced to make out of deep, deep love for their kids."
Part 2. Marching on with support.
Reflecting on the daily war these families fight, you realize these parents are basically suiting up in armor every single day. They are fighting for their children's needs at school, at the doctor's office, and out in public. They have to act as constant, exhaustive advocates, forced to diffuse arguments and deflect judgment everywhere they go. So, we're leaving you with this final powerful thought. Raising an extreme child demands a level of emotional stamina and mental fortitude that most of us can barely comprehend. There's no escape, and there's no guarantee it'll get better anytime soon. What these families need from the rest of us isn't unsolicited advice or behavior charts or judgment. What they desperately need is our grace, our empathy, and our unconditional support. So, the next time you see a parent struggling with a screaming child in public, what's it going to be? Will you offer them a judging stare, or will you be the one to offer them a compassionate smile?